It's Wednesday, April 9th, and that means it's time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. I'm Brian Walton, and this is my partner, Kyle Reis. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me.
So, as always, this is available via video form at thecardinalnation.com and audio form at Scoops, the Scoop Sports Network, and all your favorite podcast apps. So, if you get tired of looking at us, go pick up the audio version or turn down your screen or go look at other things. So we've got a lot to talk about this week. Everybody's playing baseball. Everybody's up to speed. Some folks are more up to speed than others. Unfortunately, the St. Louis Cardinals have a losing record at this point. I've had a very disappointing road trip. We're recording this before Paul Skeens faces St. Louis on Tuesday night, so we can't talk about that. But there's plenty to talk about already. One of them that you've tweeted about is Matthew Liberatore. I know you have some pretty strong feelings, number one, about how he's been used, but also it seems like he may have changed his pitch mix a little bit, done some things different in his second start versus his first. What are you seeing with Liberatore, and how do you feel about him right now?
Yeah, I have just immensely complicated and layered thoughts about Matthew Liberatore that it's tough to peel back the levels of my brain to kind of get to. It's just we know for a fact that his fastball in particular, has a lot of trouble. It has a lot of trouble against lefties. It has a lot of trouble against righties. And we saw, especially in the first game, that when he used the fastball, not the sinker, we'll get to the sinker in a second. When he used the fastball, that's when he got into the most amount of trouble. And it kind of peeked its head back again in the first inning on Monday. So then you go back to that start on Monday, and you also see another recurring theme, which is that his sinker is also kind of an issue. It's not his fastball and his sinker are kind of issue pitches for him, which is always tough. We've seen a lot of the Cardinals pitching prospects come up to the majors with suboptimal heaters and suboptimal sinkers and not have the success that maybe their prospect pedigree might have led us to believe. And what Liberatore has is a sinker that works pretty well against righties. The way, especially if he's locating it on like the lower outside corner to righties, but it needs velocity. He was throwing some 88-mile-an-hour sinkers, and that just aren't enough velocity for his movement profile. And then what we saw on the home run in the first inning was he brought that sinker, I think it was 94 miles an hour, low and inside. And we saw Pittsburgh was just hunting in that first inning. They were just hunting fastballs. They said, if this guy's going to throw us a fastball, we're going to crank it. And he got 2 quick outs on 2 pitches, but then he threw the next pitch right in the area where the pitcher was looking for the diminished pitch. So
do you think he's because he's starting and he's thinking, I got to give him 6 innings, the bullpen's struggling. Do you think he's kind of taking it easy early on? And we've talked about this. Is he more effective if he can just go out for an inning or 2 and just let it all loose? Or am I reading into this?
I think that is like 95% of it, Brian. I think that especially that first start, it became really evident that second time through the lineup, when he really struggled, I believe it was Pedro Pages, was still calling heavy for the fastball and the sinker. And I think what they were trying to do is save the rest of it for the third time around, because he was still pitching really well. And I think that luckily in his last start, when he was more effective after some early inning struggles, they started using the slider more. They started using the cutter more. I believe there was a changeup or 2 in there. And then he also started throwing the curve late in that start. So when he started using his entire repertoire, it got him into the 6th inning. It should have got him through, or got him into the 7th inning. It probably should have got him through the 7th. Pitch count got high. They wanted the righty matchup. I understand, but yeah, like I think that's going to be, if he's going to stay in a starter role, I think that they're going to need to be smarter about how they use his entire arsenal from the beginning of the start to the end of the start. And I don't think they're going to be able to use that old school mentality where it would be, all right, first time through, we're going to go fastball sinker, and then maybe those first couple of hitters it'll be a heavy fastball sinker, and we'll mix something else in. Like, they're not going to be able to do that with Matthew Liberatore, not without a huge change of his fastball and his sinker.
And, I'm all for them. Since they committed to him as a starter, I'm all for them continue to commit to him as a starter. And let's face it, looking at the rest of the rotation, it's not like he's even the biggest problem right now among the rotation. Mm-hmm. But he's the one where you can say maybe, with the right combination of coaching, there's still upside to be had. On the other hand, the bullpen has had some struggles, and you are probably a little surprised that they haven't started the shuttle between St. Louis and Memphis. Roy Kross been hit around. Fernandez, hasn't really been good since the first half of last year. If you were to send them, and maybe they'll wait till the end of the road trip, I don't know. I mean, they had Gordon Graceffo up to, take one for the team the other day. And then, as a 27th man. But if you were to send down Roycroft and Fernandez, who would you bring up and why?
Yeah, the two guys I think that you would look at the most are Roddery Munoz and probably Peter O'Brien. I did it again. Riley O'Brien.
You're never going to get off Peter O'Brien, are you?
It's funny. I'm even trying to teach myself not to do it, and I don't know, man. I probably need again. Work needs to be done to try to figure that out. But
maybe his middle name's Peter. Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. I will spend some time looking. I will submit the paperwork to make his name legally Peter if I have to.
There you go. All right. So what is it about Munoz? Because he's got some control issues, right?
Oh yeah, it's gonna get more than likely it would be a disaster, Brian. I'm not trying to pretend that it wouldn't be, but he does have pitching traits that I think are interesting, and I also think the one thing about what's going on at Memphis is they haven't played. Like they had pretty well a free weekend because of rain and weather, so that means you get two completely fresh arms, and Munoz does have some real serious command issues. But what I see more than likely with Riley O'Brien and Roddery Munoz are just two fresh arms that also have strikeout capabilities. Because that's kind of what Chris Roycroft struggles with. We've seen that Chris Roycroft has a diminished sinker, which is probably his most important pitch. If not, probably it's almost certainly his most important pitch. So to see that his sinker isn't moving the same way anymore, and also that he's not much of a strikeout guy, you're flirting with disaster. Sometimes Roycroft's command can get a little weird too. And then with Fernandez, and I understand that this is the transition year where these guys need to learn how to adjust at the major league level. But the reporting and even his own words about his slider, it's not where it needs to be. It's not where he wants it to be or they want it to be. And sure, he's getting feel for it and he's seeing it, but I just hate the idea of him, a reliever who his primary pitch is diminished, just flailing at the major league level. And I don't think it's good for him. I don't think it's good for Roycroft to have a diminished sinker and to be doing it at the major league level, because when you're a reliever, you get one chance. You get one chance and then you get blown up, and then you get another chance and then you get blown up. I just prefer that these toying and tweaking happen on a 15-day span down at Memphis while just some relief comes up and just sees what they have. Because Munoz will get swing and miss. It's just a matter of if it's worth swinging it down the middle. And, they were high on Riley O'Brien for 2 years now.
Yep. And, Fernandez had a whole year on the major league roster. So his situation is a little different from Roycroft. He's been up for a while, but he obviously needs to figure out something. And one factor that may be playing into this, and I don't know for sure, but back a couple of years ago, Major League Baseball put a new rule in place that these players can only be optioned up and down 5 times in a season. Now, that doesn't count if they're replacing somebody who goes on the injured list. But if you look at a season that's 5 or 6 months long, that means you can only send these guys up and down, like on the average once a month. So, it may be that the Cardinals are looking at the long game here too, saying, hey, we don't want to be caught in August or September and be out of opportunities to send these guys up and down. Just speculation. On the other hand, the time-honored phrase, a loss in April is just as bad as a loss in September. A loss is a loss. And, right now the pitching is clearly costing them games.
Yeah, it feels heavier right now. And maybe it's just because of how bad, you had 2 extra inning losses to the Angels that spiraled into a Ryan Helsley meltdown. And it just feels so much heavier now. So it would make sense why someone like me, more fan than a manager, would be reactionary about this. Let's get some fresh arms. Let's get some of these other guys out. Let's get them to a place where they can work on these issues comfortably. When I do understand why, if it's Marmol, if it's the front office, whatever, they might say, all right, this is what this year is about. Let's see if these guys can adjust on the fly and figure it out. And then I think you're onto something, Brian. I think you nailed it. We'll see what happens at the end of the road trip, right? Like, it makes a lot of sense, especially, with Matthew Liberatore giving him 6 2/3 innings on Monday night. Maybe Sonny Gray on Tuesday night against Paul Skeens. Maybe Sonny Gray can get into 7th inning and you can save the bullpen a little bit. But I do think that we will probably start to see a little bit of turnover, maybe not both guys, when we get back into St. Louis.
And as you said, we haven't seen a lot from Memphis, unfortunately, because of all the weather problems that they had this last weekend. But the second time around, the rotation is shaping up a little better than it was the first, and that's just something to keep an eye on. There's no indication that the Cardinals are going to make a rotation change immediately, but certainly we're watching very closely Michael McGreevy and whether he continues to progress. And frankly, Quinn Matthews has had a couple subpar starts, walked some guys in the second outing, and you want to see him get in the groove too, because I think we're going to see both those guys help the Cardinals out before we get too many months into this year.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing just before I get to all ranty, try to stop myself from it. McGreevy, I was really impressed with his last start because the opponents were spitting on his sweeper. They decided they were not going to swing at it early on in that start, and he just worked through it. He started using his entire, and then by the time he got to the late second, third time through the lineup, he was back to throwing his sweeper and getting a ton of swing and miss on it. And it was just a really good adjustment in a start. Again, that might have been Pozo. I think Pozo was catching at the time. It might have been McGreevy. It might have been pitching coach, whatever. But I just thought it was a really interesting adjustment that bore fruit.
And it's interesting that they stuck to their game plan. And, sometimes you need to do that. You need to be patient and stick with the plan versus necessarily making a mid-game adjustment that ends up, biting in the rear.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in full command that game. That was a really, really promising start.
Down at Springfield, Max Rajcic had an excellent start. I mean, Cole Roby had a good start for his first outing too, but Max Rajcic rhymes with magic, is the Texas League Player of the Week. What is different? I mean, Max Rajcic was the pitcher of the year in the system in 2023, his first year. Last year, he kind of dropped back to kind of ordinary guy status. I mean, he didn't super digress, but he didn't progress like we'd hoped he would. What was different? What did you see different this time from Max?
Yeah, I thought, he's still toying with things too, right? We know that his changeup has come a little way. We know that he's kind of augmented a slider or a cutter, a little tighter breaking pitch. That I thought was really sharp. I thought his command was really sharp. For a guy who has like college above average command, what I saw last year is it felt like he was fighting his command a lot. He was fighting particularly the corners of the plate. And it seemed like last night, the other night when he was pitching, that he had command of all of his arsenal, really. It seems like his curveball isn't as loopy. Of course, we don't have the data on it, so I can't really go back and look, but we saw in spring that his curveball was about the same, but maybe didn't have the depth that it had all last year, and it seemed a little sharper. Again, his velocity was good, and he was just in command. I think that an aggressive lineup that was a little bit more excited about doing some swinging, I think that helped him out too, as well. But yeah, look, it was a great first weekend for Springfield. I thought there was a lot of really fun games to watch with a lot of roster intrigue as well.
And if you guys don't follow Kyle, I know you do if you're listening to this, but if you don't follow Kyle R416 on X, you really need to, because Kyle is a master at capturing significant moments in games and putting them out. And one of them, of course, you were watching is Luis Gastelum's Springfield debut. I think you liked what you saw, right?
Here's what I like is he doesn't need to use his fastball up in the zone, and he doesn't need to use his changeup low in the zone. He can throw that changeup up in the zone and the fastball low in the zone and get swing and miss. And I think that there is a collective thought with Luis Gastelum or the pitchers that are basically just fastball changeup pitchers that you have to be able to throw the fastball up and you have to be able to throw the changeup down. And his stuff is so good that he doesn't have to. He can reverse that. He can use it however he wants. And that's really, really unique. And it's not just because of how good his changeup is. It's because of how sneaky the fastball is, even in the low 90s, how sneaky the fastball is out of his hand as he attacks the hitter and attacks the plate. I thought that was evident. He threw in the first batter he faced, he threw two fastballs, then polished that guy off with a changeup, and then he let up a grounder, walked somebody, and then the fourth batter he faced were two changeups. Like again, middle high in the zone. They're kind of balls on tee, but the changeup's so good. And then he finished after throwing those two changeups pretty well right down the middle of the plate. He finished the hitter off with a fastball at the knees that you cannot react to. And even at 92, whatever it was, 93 miles an hour is my understanding. there's just no reaction. You cannot react to it. So it was just, that was a really awesome moment. Again, because we have it, he skipped Peoria and he's getting challenged as a 23-year-old at AA. And again, probably the most promising relief option the Cardinals system has.
Yeah. And a guy, where did you rank him on your list? Do you recall? He's
15th, I
in the
believe.
top 25 in mine, but not in the top 20 yet. Maybe he should be.
Yeah, that was me. I buy heavily into that changeup, Brian. I just, his stats were very impressive at Palm Beach last year, but yeah, the changeup and honestly, like his pitchability without, the changeup, fastball, strikeouts, without a whole lot of walks, it was just I don't know, and he gets a decent amount of ground balls for his arsenal too. That's why I have him as high.
So we'll be talking about Luis Gastelum a lot this season. Let's talk about Palm Beach because there's a bunch of guys on Palm Beach that are new. You're excited because you can see them on video for the first time, a lot of them. You made a very interesting tweet. You talked about Cade McGee, the 9th rounder from last year, and Josh Kross, the 6th rounder, who is either a first baseman or catcher. And you said they are two of the more important hitting prospects for the long-term health of the system. Where did that come from, and what were you thinking when you said that? Because these are guys that, at least right now, aren't ranked prospects. I don't think they're on my list or your list, but yet you've determined they're important guys, and I'm curious why.
Well, that's part of the reason why, Brian. I did have Kross. I think he's 46th on my list. He's right at the bottom, and I couldn't decide what to do with him.
I think I did too. Now that you mention it.
Awesome. Yeah. You'll have to go to the Cardinal Nation and find out.
Let me get out my prospect guide and check the list.
Yes, exactly. I think that's part of the reason, though, Brian, is you have two top 10 round picks.
48.
48. Here, well, while you're doing that, I think I had him at something. Now, who knows where I had him, honestly, Brian? I don't know.
Anyway, sorry, two top 10 so they're day 2 picks in the draft.
Yeah, and the Cardinals haven't really had a whole lot of success with bats in the draft. We talked about it, especially at least not since the era that is already affecting the lineup, right? Not since Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan and all those guys. Like they really have kind of have missed that area. So you're talking about two guys that are, for the most part, outside of everybody's top 50, that if they can reach their potential with the new hitting coaches and the new instructors, and whatever their potential is, because Cade McGee is a really fascinating and really great defensive third baseman. He made a great play in tonight's Palm Beach game against Bradenton already. And Josh Kross, who I view as a first baseman, but had a really great weekend catching, making his organizational debut as a catcher.
After playing first base all spring, by the way, I don't think I saw him I was down there for 2 months. I don't think I saw Josh Kross wear the catching gear once. So I'm not sure where that came from, but hey, what the heck?
Yeah, might as well, man. Just like, here we go.
I mean, he did in college. It's not like Kross can't catch. Don't get me wrong, but it seemed like the Cardinals had turned the page on that, but they didn't.
That's what I thought for sure too. When I did my rankings, I had him as my first baseman. I did like the catching thing was out, but not to continue to repeat myself, but like these guys are not top 50 prospects in the organization to anybody else. And my tweet was also about like national standing and national understanding. And I think that right now, if you were to ask a lot of the national people, they would say the Cardinals' strength in the minor league level is pitching. And then outside of Davis and Bernal and Crooks and Weatherholt, that there's some really big questions about position players. That's why we've seen Padilla and we've seen Ray Rodriguez and we've seen on my list Travis Honeyman kind of make it into like everybody's top 20 list. It's because the Cardinals have a hitting deficiency, Brian.
But I'm still looking for guys like Cho and Davis and Levinson. Yeah. I'm looking for those guys to step up. You're kind of on the guys on the fringes, hoping that they'll come in. And maybe there's an Albert Pujols out there, and that's not fair. Maybe there's a 6th or 9th round guy who can become a contributor. What was Donovan? What were Nootbaar? They were in that range. So I get where you're coming from now, Kyle.
Yeah. I'm not trying to say that they are. I don't personally believe either of them has the ability, at least right now, as they're made, as their what their talents are. I don't think that they have the ability to be everyday major leaguers, either of them. I think that they can develop that. But I just think if you get to a point where if they make it through a really healthy and a really successful 2025 season, and they maybe both put themselves in a position to make a double A debut or spend half the year at Peoria and still have success at Peoria, then I think that a lot of people who, like myself, do a lot of bloviating, that watch other
That's
organizations.
called commentary, Kyle. Commentary.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like that. I do a lot of commentary, like I do. I think that they'll like you'll start to see some of the impressions of the organization start to change. But you nailed it too. Like those guys, those other guys, the Levinson and Cho in particular, even Baez to another degree, but Levinson and Cho in particular, those guys need to take a step up. But I guess if you have Kross and you have McGee in the background, especially because of McGee's defense, I love McGee's defense third. But if you have those guys to backfill if Levinson doesn't take a step forward or Cho doesn't take a step
Now,
forward.
there's a couple pitchers at Palm Beach that you've put up some video and have talked about. One of them is a guy that, you know, I kind of remember from the draft, a 14th rounder, Mason Burns, signed for $80,000, you know, kind of like an afterthought. But this guy's got a pretty good slider, among other things, right?
Oh yeah. Like, well, before I rant on about it, the Palm Beach bullpen is exciting. So it's full of guys that have either been hurt or we haven't seen yet. And you know,
Melfi Infante is another one, right? That
yeah, Nelfi's pitching tonight. I watched a little bit of that before I joined you, and there's just so many intriguing arms. But yeah, the slider on Mason Burns, and also his mechanics are definitely distracting and also deceptive. And like again, that slider is probably a pitch that's good enough to pitch out of a major league bullpen. It's just a matter of how everything else kind of adjusts around it.
and you know, it's interesting. Burns, 14th rounder, Brant Thompson, 17th rounder, was a senior sign. Those guys, at least it looks like, are going to get starts initially for Palm Beach. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're projected as major league starters. As you said, the Cardinals want to give these guys longer outings, an opportunity to use all their pitches to continue to grow. And that's hard to do when you're asked to come in an inning at a time as a reliever. So, you know, it's important to not get locked into a guy as a role, but necessarily it's designed to, you know, allow him to build his repertoire.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And we'll see. That's one of the best things about Palm Beach. Yeah, that you'll see these weird, what is basically just like almost triple piggyback starts, you know, where you might get Infante, who throws 3 innings, followed by Nolan Sparks, who throws 3 innings, followed by, you know, Jack Finley as they continue to stretch him out, who might throw 2. And then, you know, you get Sam Brodenson, who finishes the game in the 9th. Like that's part of the reason why I was so anxious to get Palm Beach on MILB TV, because the setup is so different than even at Peoria from how the players are used. And it's exciting. It's more exciting than, it's not more exciting. It's a different kind of exciting than what you see at the upper levels of the minors.
And again, I don't need to give a sales pitch for MLB because they make a little more money than the two of us. But MLB at bat, that's the offering that gives you the minor league coverage for $29.99 a year if you don't have MLB TV to watch out of network games. And you know, you need to buy that if you care about the minor leagues, if you don't have it already. Yeah. Now, I skipped over Peoria, but let's come back. You know, we need to talk a little bit about Gerardo Salas. Got the opening day start. What did you see from him?
He pitched really well. You know, one of my favorite, you know, Brian, sometimes I get focused on little quirky things. And I love Gerardo Salas and watching him pitch, because when he comes set, he starts his motion and he kicks his left foot all the way back in this like swinging motion, and then brings it all the way up and then goes to the mound. And I think it's quirky. I think it's rhythmic, and I like watching it.
And if I was Victor Scott, I'd love the heck out of it, because I bet I could steal like crazy against him. But we'll have to see. But Zack Showalter didn't get the start the first time, but he was one of these guys in a tandem start who actually pitched better than the start. I forget who he followed that day. Was it Davila or Rincon?
It was Davila. Yeah, Davila.
Yeah. But Showalter's a guy that pitched in relief last year. Of course, came over from Baltimore in the Jack Flaherty trade back in August of 2023. Has a lot of potential, but has had trouble staying healthy. So Showalter will be, I mean, if he can start throwing 4 and increase to 5 and increase to 6 and continue to have that kind of results, he's going to be a guy to watch. And he's already in my top 20. I really like Showalter as a reliever, but as a starter, I like him even more.
Yeah, I think that was the most impressive, to me, that was the most impressive performance this weekend. If I had even more so than Rajcic, you know, he was throwing fastballs and his cutter looked good, his slider looked good. I think he threw 65 pitches, like 39 or 40 of which were strikes. His fastball velocity was not what we saw at the end of the last year, 95 at the end of his Palm Beach season. It was more in the 92, 93 range, and he was still getting a ton of swing and misses and commanding it and feeling it.
But by the way, that's up. He was around the 90-ish in spring training. And again, guys are building up, and he was coming off an injury as well. So, like I said, I try not to even pay attention to the radar gun in spring training. But if Showalter continued to build his velocity, that's obviously a positive. As you look back at the last week, Kyle, is there anything else that you want to discuss that has been memorable to you in either the major or minor leagues before this week becomes a memory and we move on to whatever happens in the next 7 days?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the memory, I think is what I'm looking forward to. No, I think what we saw to Takor Roby and Max Rajcic at AA is a great start, especially because some of the struggles that we saw out of Memphis. I'm anxious to see as we record this, Ian Bedell is going to be on the mound for Memphis. I want to see how he adjusts. I'm really looking forward to that. But no, just in the last week, like I think that one thing that sticks out to me is just how interesting those pitchers at the lower levels continue to be. Again, whether it be Showalter, I think Hansel Rincon is on the mound for Peoria tonight, making his high season debut. I just think like there's a lot of really interesting and intriguing arms, whether they be bullpen or starting arms at Peoria and Palm Beach in particular, that I'm really excited to continue to watch their development. And they all made great first impression. Well, one person we didn't even talk about, Christian Worley. Christian Worley made his organizational
debut, long-awaited professional debut.
Yeah, so I guess there is hope for Alec Willis to come back and pitch like he did last year. But I know, so like even Christian Worley, Jack Finley, we talked about him, but like it's just there's a lot of really intriguing and interesting arms that have kind of been in the making now for a while that we're starting to see now that the season's getting underway.
And Christian Worley, for those folks who want to know, was the 9th rounder back in 2023. And just like Charles Harrison from the 7th round, who we haven't seen yet in his extended spring training. Again, these are day 2 guys in the draft that the Cardinals took a shot at. And, some of them may come through. Kyle, thank you again for your excellent commentary. Folks who follow us know that we'll be back here next week at this time to give you another 30 minutes or so about what's happening in the Cardinals minor league system, as well as a little touch of the major leagues too, because let's face it, this is all one seamless unit, and the minor leagues wouldn't exist if they weren't a feeder for the big leagues. So, maybe the Cardinals will turn it around by then. Maybe they'll get some different players. Let's hope something changes on the trajectory that they've been on.
Yeah. Perfectly said. I have nothing else to say. Let's hope.
There you are. So we'll say goodbye for now and see you next week.